into things, I would like to recognize a few of our founding members of the Atlantic Women's Venture Foundation, or as we like to call it, the AWVF. We have our three Sandpiper general partners, Rhiannon Davies. Hi, Rhiannon. Kathy Bennett. Hi, Kathy. Sarah Young. Hello, Sarah. And the chair of the AWVF Board of Directors, Shannon McDonald. Hi, Shannon. Thank you all for being here. I think Kathy is here, and if Kathy, I'll hand it over to you, Kathy, for a couple words.
EC, I'm not sure if she's on, so maybe we'll have Sarah say a few words on behalf of Sandpiper.
Perfect.
I'm happy to, and playing the role of Kathy Bennett. So a big welcome that we're delighted for a number of reasons. First and foremost, always when we have a gathering of people, like-minded people who are in learning mode. And then also, I think many of you will have had the experience whenever in the company of Nicole Leblanc, you always walk away with new ideas and inspired. And then I think with, as you heard from EC, this is a new series that we're launching. So really excited to be kicking it off, and in particular to be kicking it off with Nicole, and very significant that we're kicking it off with Nicole, since she's one of the founders of Sandpiper. And so it is only fitting that we are starting off this series, the Masterclass series. And I think one of the things that as you listen today and take away learnings, would love thoughts, suggestions on what you would like to hear from going forward. I think one of the things that we're very committed to at Sandpiper, and in particular the foundation, is bringing people together. What is it that founders want to learn about? What is it that is both useful, practical, and when you're carving out time, that it's relevant in your everyday lives and in the businesses that you're building. So a big welcome. Thanks for carving out the time, and I will hand it back to EC.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So today's event is, like I said, is the first session of our 5-part masterclass series hosted by both the AAWVF and Sandpiper Ventures. The Atlantic Women's Venture Foundation helps women entrepreneurs connect with people, organizations, and investors. Working in collaboration with Sandpiper Ventures, they aim to increase the number of female funders through education and connections. Sandpiper is a woman-led venture capital based here in Canada's East Coast, providing a platform where women investors and founders can radically disrupt the venture capital environment. Sandpiper invests in women-led startups in Atlantic Canada and across the country. Both organizations have come together to create the series to offer expert knowledge to female founders on their entrepreneurial journey. So we'll start the presentation with a 20-minute presentation from Nicole, and then I'll open up the floor to questions at the end. So feel free to put in your questions in the group in the chat, or you can go ahead and use the raise hand emoji for the end. So yeah, to introduce Nicole Leblanc today. She's a partner with 2150, an urban tech and sustainability focused VC fund, tackling major unsolved problems across the urban stack, from the way our cities are designed, constructed, and powered, to the way people live, work, and are cared for. Prior to this, Nicole was the director of investments and partnerships for Alphabet Sidewalk Labs, with work that works with developers and cities to build more sustainable, innovative, and equitable places. Before joining, Sidewalk managed a portfolio of 150 plus seed stage startups with director roles at BDC Capital and NBIF. Nicole is also a founder and investor in Sandpiper Ventures. She began her career as a CPA, including roles as a controller at Gannon Bros, an East Coast family-run confectionery manufacturer that invented the chocolate bar. She stays active in the community through board roles in Innova Corp, Propel, and Brilliant Labs, as well as actively mentoring with Creative Destruction Lab and Next Canada. Thank you, Nicole, for being here today. And
Good to be here.
Perfect. And I'll hand off the stage to you right now.
Perfect. Great to see everybody. I see some familiar names, so looking forward to chatting. And so I have a presentation I'm going to take you through around Fundraising 101, but from the VC perspective, because all of you will see different presentations, and you have seen some of them before. However, I wanted to kind of maybe give you some insights as to how VCs think about this as well. So let's just make sure I get the right screen here. Can everybody see my screen? Izzy, is it working? Good. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Great. So I can only see a few of you in my screen. So if there's any questions, I think we have lots of time at the end, but if there's something pressing in the middle, Izzy, maybe just chime in and I can take a pause. So excited to be here. And I'm from New Brunswick. I've lived in Halifax. My husband went to NASCAD and lived in Toronto. And now I am calling in from Copenhagen in Northern Europe. So it's very dark here, but no snow. So very similar weather to Halifax. So really excited to be chatting with all of you. So I'll kind of breeze through the first bit, which most of you will be familiar with. But venture capital is the investment of funds in a company where there's an element of risk, and it's typically a very, very new business where there still has to be a lot of work done. And so that is what I have done in my career for the last 15 years. And it's what I'm really excited to see Sandpiper doing, is taking more risk with female founders. And venture capital is not just for tech startups. There have been a number of companies, like some of the logos on here, that actually started out with venture capital. It's certainly evolved over the years. However, when these companies first started, there was actually significant risk to what they were doing. They are certainly not startups anymore, but at the time when they emerged, they were. So this is just to showcase, if you want to look up any of these companies and hear about their journey, it's very interesting, and it's maybe not as traditional as you would have expected. And so why are venture capital startups important? So I'm assuming that most of you on the call are startup founders. And I want to thank you for that, because it's very, very important for us as a society to move forward, to have people that are risk takers and that are really willing to try new things and experiment. And otherwise, we'd really just be, a bunch of boring accountants like I started out being. So I think it's really exciting that all of you are doing this. But venture capital and startups have an outsized impact on the economy. And so you can see just some of these stats here, and I'll share this afterwards if you like, so you don't have to madly take notes, you can listen. However, these are just really important. So, although startups might make a smaller portion of actual dollars distributed within the economy, 35% of all jobs come from some sort of tech startup. And startups are responsible for a huge amount of the new net jobs created. So that's really important for economies and for us to continue to grow and be more prosperous in Canada and the East Coast. And this is one of my favorite shows, so I try to use as many memes from them as possible. So what you really need to think about from all of the different types of funding that exists, venture capital is looking for risky companies where it's typically illiquid, which means you can't just sell your shares like you could in the stock market. Once you've invested, we have to invest for a while. So that's why we do a lot of due diligence and really want to understand, what the kind of the plan is and what our exit potential could be. And there's no near-term cash flow for this money's going in and we're not getting dividends or anything like that. So as you're out raising money, these are the qualities that pertain to you. And this is why banks typically don't fund. That's why it's probably very difficult for a lot of startups to get a loan, is because, banks have my money, my pension, my savings, and I don't want them doing these things. That's why I want, just a small portion, of my assets, thinking about something like this. So as you're out fundraising, this is why it's very difficult to get funding from more traditional sources. And venture capital has certainly evolved over the years. So if you think about, where did, the original, risky, non-liquid, non-near-term cash flow, these big bets come from? Isabella of Spain, the world was supposedly flat. And, she invested in Christopher Columbus to, go out and, and see the world. And I always use this example because I like to say that one of the first VCs in history was actually a woman. And then you have JP Morgan, investing in Thomas Edison. Like, what is this electricity thing? What is this light bulb thing? And, will this really work? Or are you just going to burn down the entire city? And so these things that we take for granted now were actually very, very risky when people first started. So there's some actually really interesting things. If you haven't seen Something Ventured, I think it might be on Vimeo. You can certainly purchase it, online somewhere to watch. It's just a really good, movie to kind of understand how venture capital came to be and how Silicon Valley came to be, because most of the more risky investors were on the East Coast, so in New York and Boston. And then Silicon Valley is what we all associate with venture capital today. And it really, kind of emerged through this story. And so I think it's really important to understand where a lot of it came from so that you can see, potentially where it's going. This probably needs to be updated because the world's been moving so fast over the last 2 years. However, when I first got into venture capital 15 years ago, this is what venture capital was. There was no, pre-seed, seed, seed plus. It was basically you go out and you raise a Series A round of financing and then a Series B and a Series C. And it was still pretty risky, at that Series A stage where there still wasn't product market fit. And now there's, institutional investors investing in seed, and now there's all these stages. And so I think, as startup founders, it's important to understand that, kind of what the ranges of these labels are, but they're very fluid depending on your industry, depending on, what your business model is, depending on, many, many, many factors. So although these are kind of standard labels, that would definitely say over time, they're getting more fluid. And, this is a great chart. This is more for an IT company. So if you're not an IT company, some of these things won't apply. But you can think about, ideation, how much money you need, at that stage, who typically funds you, and what does that mean from a traction perspective? And so you can kind of see as you move through the different stages what that looks like. And these, again, are generally rule of thumb. And you can quickly skip some of the stages. So, for example, I saw a company I know in Toronto called Key Living. They work on, alternative home ownership models. They just raised an $11 million seed round. And so they've kind of, they're a more experienced team. So they just sort of skipped some steps. It was their first round. So technically it's a seed round. However, it was actually 11 million. And, some of these, I'm in the climate and urban tech sector now. I would say the average Series A is more like, the Series B, 10 to 25 million. And so as you're going out and thinking about these things, I think it's important to, understand, have a good lawyer. They see a lot of deals, have a good accountant. They see a lot of deals. They can kind of, give you benchmarks against what's going on in the market, in your section, in your sector, in your geography, that sort of thing. So I want to take a little bit of time and talk to you about how venture capital funds work. And so then you can see when you're pitching VCs, kind of what the factors that we're thinking about are. So just like you, we have investors. So here's some venture capitalists, great funds like Sandpiper, the fund that I'm at, you get some of these, kind of celebrity VCs out there now. So we're the ones actually making investments, and we invest in startup founders, right? So that's great. So you're a startup, you have an investor that's a venture capitalist. We have an investor that's typically, an institutional investor. This can be, a bank. So all the big banks in Canada are investing in funds. Scotiabank, TD, all of them are. Pension funds, the CPP. So any of you that expect to, be able to tap into the Canadian pension plan when you retire, they actually invest a portion of their capital in venture capital as well. So they're investing into funds. It's just, they're not going to invest directly this way into startups, because that actually takes, a lot of, effort and due diligence. And, they would rather just say, hey, we'll invest in, these funds here, who can then invest, and we'll still be able to get some of that backwards. And insurance companies and, other, big corporates, they're also investing in venture funds. And so I believe my next slide is the model. So you can see, so, this is you guys down here, here are these companies. This is, my fund, this is Sandpiper, but we have all these other partners up here. And, we also have to report to them. And so we've promised them that this is how we're going to invest. These are the types of returns we're going to get. And so that as we're doing due diligence, we need to make sure that we're actually talking to our investors and kind of adhering to what we've promised them. The other thing that we do is we are wrong 80% of the time. And in any other industry, you would actually not have a job if you were wrong 80% of the time. And by wrong, I mean that we haven't actually, invested in a unicorn. It doesn't mean we didn't learn anything. It doesn't mean that the company didn't learn anything. It doesn't mean that the company was a bad company. It just didn't hit the timing right, or it didn't have the right team, or, not all of you, unfortunately, on this call will be unicorns in this company, but what you learn in the company you're at now, could actually add a significant amount of value to your next company. And maybe that's going to be the unicorn. So it's actually only, if we make 10 investments, really only 2 are going to be, those ones that you see that IPO, that get the big exits. So we are looking for unicorns. And I love baseball, so I'll use a baseball analogy. So we need not to hit home runs, we need to hit grand slams. And so if we make investments in a fund, in a company, we need you to be a 10x return. And every single company, so that's when you're going through due diligence and somebody's saying, tell me how big your market is and what your market share is. This is what we're trying to figure out, is that if we make 20 investments in a fund, 2 investments are actually going to be the ones that we make the majority of our returns on. And so we need to ensure that you're going to be that grand slam home run, and it needs to have a big market, and you need to really be shooting for the stars, because it's only going to take 2 companies. And if we invest in companies that don't have that potential, and those are the only ones to succeed, then our investors get mad at us. And so that's why we're doing all this due diligence, to really understand how big your market is, what your churn rates are, because we need to understand how you're going to be this tech unicorn. So there's people, there's kind of the 3 Ps, people and product, I say, are kind of the first 2 that I'll take you through. But basically, how does a venture capital fund make a decision? And at the early stage, it's all about team. So what you guys have to do is show an investor why you're the best people to do that, why you're unique, why this problem. And I would say that, if you're solving your own problem, that's great. So maybe you worked at a company and this was a market problem the company had, and you found a way to solve it. So you've left to start this problem, or to solve this problem. Or maybe you grew up in the construction industry and you now have a construction tech startup that you want to help solve the problem from, because you've basically been having this discussion around the dinner table every night since you were a kid with your family. And so really, we call it like eating your own dog food, right? This is something that, is a problem you've seen, you experienced it firsthand, and you're trying to solve it. So like, you are the best team to do that. The other thing is, sometimes maybe you bring a unique perspective. So to kind of put on the other side of the coin, where you aren't embedded in the industry, you haven't, been eating and breathing this your whole life. And so you're coming and bringing a unique perspective on it. So this is really interesting, where, maybe somebody from the automotive industry is now applying robotics to the construction industry, as an example, where you're not necessarily tied down by all the norms and expectations that come with construction, because you've been in the, aviation or the automotive industry, and you're applying like best practices from that industry to another one. So it's really important to get the narrative about your team down, because right now at the seed stage in particular, investors are taking a bet on you and your ability to be able to iterate, to be able to understand the problem, to really have the connections in the industry. And so this is really, really important. And the other thing is, you have to be a storyteller. You have to, get people to come along for the dream, right? Not to get into politics, but like, you need to be President Zelensky, that is like fighting for his country, and he's not willing to, I need ammunition, not a ride. Like, it's really important to, have that narrative and to like win the hearts and minds. There's been companies that, like there's a Halifax-based company that, could do some really years ago, that could do some really interesting things with genetics. And one of the things is they could do something with dogs, and they could do something with people, they could do something with many industries, but everybody's got a dog, right? Or everybody loves their dog. And so, or everybody loves dogs in general. So you can tell a story around the dog, people remember that and they identify with it. So storytelling's really, really important, which Tara, one of the organizers of this call, she'll be able to give you lots of insights into that. The other one is product. So team is really great, but you also have to, articulate what you're selling. And so product market fit is really important. And as a founder, you are so passionate about what you're doing. You just absolutely love your product, your company, and you eat, live, and breathe this every day. And so how do you explain this to your VCs, and how do you move into product market fit? And product market fit means you have customers and you don't know them. This is not, somebody in the local geography that wants to support you. This is not somebody that went to the same university as you or is 1 degree separated from you. This is somebody that came in because of your marketing messaging. And so once you get to that, where you actually start to have customers and you have no idea, how you got connected to them, then that's important. That to get to that part. And the other thing is, so A, getting product market fit. And B, really understanding, how the founder came to solve this problem. So why, as a founder, have you decided that this is a problem you want to tackle, and how have you gone about tackling it? And lastly, the world needs 2 different types of innovation. So you have, completely disruptive innovation. This is Elon Musk just going and, building electric cars and like forcing everybody to come along, or incremental innovation where you gradually, step by step, move things forward. And so each of them are, they both have value. This kind of statement around a vitamin versus an aspirin, where, a vitamin is great. You take one every day, you're going to be healthy. It's going to be wonderful. You're going to have a healthy body. You're going to live a great life. Versus an aspirin, you have a pain and you need it solved now. And so I think you really need to understand, are you a vitamin or an aspirin? You can scale faster if you're an aspirin, but vitamins do okay too. And so I think that's important. So I'm going to back people, product, and then lastly, market. So kind of the old adage around location. That's very important. Talking about grand slams and home runs, you need a big market to do that. This is why the market size is so important. And market size is also somewhat subjective. Many factors can, affect it over time. When Uber first started, they were only doing black car limos. That's all they were replacing, these like very custom, trips that you had to call for. And it wasn't a very big market. And a lot of people passed because they're like, oops, I'm getting a notice that the meeting might end. So somebody can take a peek at that. So a lot of people passed on it because they really, said, well, that's not a big enough market. I don't think it can be very big. But then they said, well, we can actually tackle the whole taxi market. It's a huge market. So it's very, very different. Those are, where they started and where they ended up were very different. So I think it's important to think about that. And I have seen this, a lot of times where, maybe you don't have the best team yet because you're still getting started, you don't have the resources, but you can actually still succeed in a really great market. But you can have the best team. And if the market's so small, you could still get 100% penetration, but you can only go so far. So it's really important to think about that market. And so if you're not in a big market right now, really try to think about how, you can maybe expand to other markets. Could this be applicable to other geographies? Like, what does that look like? So it's really important to have a big market. Next slide here. And then lastly, this is the other component that adds to it. Pure luck. Sometimes it's just timing. It's the right place at the right time. Nobody expected COVID. Ed tech companies were doing okay, but they weren't really excelling. Ed tech companies are crazy now. Venture capitalists really weren't interested in ed tech companies in 2020. Now everybody's investing in ed tech companies. So there's a component of luck to everything you do. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. That is true. This might not be the perfect meme to get the test of time, but you also have to really think about who you're getting into bed with from a VC perspective, because this is a 10-year relationship and you need to like your VCs. I call it the airport test. So you've both been to a conference, you get snowed in an airport for 3 days. So do you guys just go off in your separate corners and never see each other until the plane comes, until you actually get into the airport? Do you, go have dinner and some wine and you like build a new strategic plan? You don't necessarily have to be best friends, but you have to find ways that you want to spend time together and really solve this problem together. And so I think that's really important. I don't know if you want me to kind of talk about this. You guys probably know a lot of this stuff, but it's really important to get a good lawyer because, get a lawyer that knows VC, because then they truly can make sure that your company is set up for success. And it's way cheaper to do it when you're first getting started versus when you actually have to fix it later at like a Series A stage. And so all of these types of instruments that you can get investment through, have pros and cons. And, you have to see what's best for your industry, what's going on at the time, how much money you need, how quick you need to move, that sort of thing. And, just to reiterate from the first part, risky, illiquid, and no near-term cash flow. These are the types of things that VCs look for. Large market, high growth, fast growth. You can generate, hundreds of thousands of revenue in 7 to 10 years, probably, not the potential for exit during that time. And you're going to be raising every 12 months now. It used to be 24, but you're really raising, every 12 months. So as a CEO, as a founder, that's important to note that you might be so excited about your product and you really, really just want to like focus on, growth of the company. But in reality, you're going to spend 50% of your time fundraising all the time. There might be a few lulls right after the closings, but for the most part, you're always going to be raising. That's just part of life, and you need to figure out, how to be able to adjust your day accordingly. Valuation is always a tricky subject. There's a bunch of different things that go into it. You can do, discounted cash flow analysis. You can like work backwards and say, if I'm going to exit for $1 billion, this is how much money I need to raise. VCs, we typically have a range that we need to order to get, our returns that we've promised our investors. And so, this is always a negotiation, but there's just a number of factors, that fit into it. I think what's really important is, I'd rather have a smaller piece of a bigger pie. And I think it just goes for both the founder, and the investor. We just need to find, that best fit for both of us. And, there's just a lot of factors that go into it. And like, there is no kind of like formula that you can just put in to help figure that out. But everybody wants to be the tech unicorn with $1 billion valuation. But what you have to know is you can get your $1 billion valuation, but on what other terms around governance, around veto rights, around, how much control other people have of your company. So it's not just valuation, although everybody focuses on valuation. There's so many other factors that you really need to be aware of. As investors, we often take board seats because we want to, safeguard our investment, but for the most part, we want to help you, we want to be part of the conversation. We see lots of companies. We like to think we're pretty smart and add value. Some of us do, some of us don't. So it's really important to understand, what that relationship looks like and what those terms are, and, what you can and can't do without the approval of your board or your investors. There's 2 different types of VCs. So people like, my fund 2150 and Sandpiper, were regular venture capital funds featured on the left, and like not one's bad and not one's good. They're venture capital is, like 6 of one, half a dozen the other, just depends what you need. So, you have to understand with like corporate VCs, it sometimes takes a little longer, but you can get access to their business lines. So often the big banks, the big telcos, the big, industrial companies, they have these, business lines that you can get great contracts from, great logos, but it takes time to do that. You can sometimes access their technologies and get free access to some of their platforms. You can be, identifying new geographic markets, because then they can take you through their existing supply chain. It's amazing. They can be super value add, but, often there's a lot of turnover in some of these organizations. Sometimes there's conflicts of interest between the different departments, between the person that's on your board, trying to help you, and then they might actually end up being competitive with you. So it's really just tough. And so if you're going to look at getting investment from a strategic, they can add so much value, but you really need to understand, what parameters they're operating in. Some of them invest directly, some of them invest in funds like us and Sandpiper. Some of them have acceleration programs and incubation programs, and sometimes that's just as good as getting an investment because of the value add component. Finishing up here, a number of trends that have been happening in VC over the last little bit that you need to be aware of as a founder. So people tend to like to write larger checks in fewer companies. Just generally, this is where the data is going, more so at the later stages. But that's why you're seeing some of these bigger rounds. There's also some of these, later stage groups like private equity starting to come in, and right in come in a lot earlier than expected. So they're sort of changing the dynamics. Longer timelines. It's taking now 10 years to IPO. Larger funds going up and down the stack, investing from seed all the way to Series D. More non-traditional sources of financing. So there's now groups like Bank. That's the group I featured in the Startup Founders image that do revenue-based financing. Lots of just interesting new paths, and all types of other groups that can start to fund. You can get creative, especially with crypto and things like that. So lastly, here are a few resources. If you haven't read any of these books or listen to some of these podcasts, these are great for founders and really help you think through the fundraising process. And that is it for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. I see we have 1 minute and 43 seconds. So we are going to get cut off in a little bit, and then we're just going to go back. Hopefully the same link works, where we're just all going to rejoin with the link, and then we're going to have a Q&A session, and hopefully you all have questions prepared. If not, I have a couple that I could ask Nicole to kind of help us get started, and yeah, see you all soon.
Is this correct? Do we rejoin here?
Yes, you are in the right spot. I think I spoke too soon. But it seems like everything should be back to normal, and we're gonna have it. We'll be fine. We'll have a 20-minute Q&A session, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so while everyone's getting their questions ready, I could start with the ones I have here prepared. Okay. So the first question I have here for you, Nicole, is how and where would you start the research for funding opportunities? So I know you had a really, you had a long list of, what investors are looking for and how founders can organize and station themselves to look very attractive to investors. But what advice would you have for starting that process on who to reach out to and how to reach out to them?
So the first thing is when you're fundraising, be very systematic. Put together a Google Sheets list, put all the VCs in it, and start tracking like who are you going to reach out to. Like what's your messaging, because you might have different messages for different types of VCs. What's the next step? The squeaky wheel really does get the grease, and so you have to find that balance between being persistent but not annoying, right? Because everybody's busy, and so how do you make sure you're top of the inbox, but you're also being respectful, of everybody's time? People are trying to balance too many things. And so, making sure that you're keeping people, aware of what you're doing. Every time you reach out, you have a new tidbit that shows like you have additional growth and you have, this great new client or this great new meeting or whatever it is. So be very systematic about it, because it can really suck a lot of your time. As VCs, we also have to fundraise. And so again, like we try and be very systematic about it so that, we can actually get back to the day-to-day business of, building your actual company. And so be very systematic. And there's a number of ways to do it. So one, just go to the Canadian Venture Capital Association's website and look at all the VCs. Do your research. So don't just reach out with the standard pitch every time. Say, hey, Nicole, I think that, we'd be a great fit for your fund because you invested in this type of company. And that's exactly like the, kind of the industry we're in. Or I love your blog post or your tweet on this. It seems really aligned with what we're working on. So basically show me that, you've done the homework. And the same thing, if I'm a VC and I'm reaching out to you, you don't want me to be like, hey, I'm a VC and I invest in Series A companies. You want me to say, hey, I went to your website and I saw you guys are working with X company, or I'm super impressed with your, thought leadership piece on Y. Like, I think it's really important to make sure that, you're having a high quality interaction, not just, kind of doing like a big kind of reach out. And so that's why you have a spreadsheet. So you can say, I sent this article to Nicole, or put it in a CRM system, or however you want to do it. I think it's just really important to be very systematic about it. The resources are like CVCA website, talking to other founders, your lawyer and your accountant, listening to podcasts, like go reach out to that big US VC if that's who you really, really want. And, try and get warm entries where you can. But if you can't, then just, tweet at them, send them LinkedIn messages, hello at whatever their fund is, whatever works.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have a question in the chat, and it's from Gabrielle. She asked, how would you describe the day-to-day of a VC investor? What expectations do you have of your founders?
So my day-to-day never turns out like I expect it to be. A lot of meetings, and I'm really trying to get away from having a lot of meetings. But there's all kinds of meetings. Your intro calls with new companies you come across, other VCs that reach out to you that want to share ideas. I'm interested in maybe a particular sector. So for example, right now we're looking into cooling within buildings. So we have like all these meetings with like experts in the cooling sector. And so it's just, and then stuff pops up in the portfolio. So then you have to, kind of clear your whole afternoon to deal with it. So I would say my day-to-day is very different. I kind of say that, my job is a little depressing because I'm meeting with all of you on an everyday basis. You're at the top of your field. You guys are super passionate about what you're doing. And like, sometimes I go home and I'm like, wow, I haven't accomplished anything. Like that person's doing this and like they're changing the world and they know so much, because I get to know a little bit about a lot of things, and I don't get to be an expert at any one thing. And it's it's really like exciting that I get to work with all of you, but sometimes I kind of get sad about it as well. Expectations of founders, I think it's really important to set those at the beginning. So when you're talking to your VC, ask them, do you take board seats? What is your, kind of norms? Do you want to have a weekly check-in, a monthly check-in? How hands-on do you want to be? What's the value add that you bring? What do you think I need help with that you can actually, support me in? And so I think it really just depends. Some of our founders we're very, very active with. Others, maybe, we're less active with, or maybe they're very skilled in one area that we don't need help with. So we're helping them with another area. And our fund in particular has some non-investment people on it. So we have a head of sustainability, and we actually offer up his time to the portfolio so that he can help them think about their sustainability strategies. What frameworks are they going to have to adhere to in the coming years? What policy is coming down? Are we going to get a carbon tax? Like all of these things, he's helping companies think through that. So when you're talking to VCs, talk to their portfolio, ask for references on VCs, just like we want to, talk to your customers. You should want to talk to mine.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have a hand up. Leah, would you like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask?
Hi, thanks, Nicole. That was a great presentation. A lot of that information, I think, was presented in a way that I don't think we've thought about it before. But my question is, I know you said about like the cold reach out and kind of like, a warm intro is better than a cold intro. I'm just wondering from your experience, what's usually the time frame between like the nurturing time frame between VCs and founders, like from reaching out and kind of coming to some common ground to term sheets?
So if you've already started your fundraising process, you want it to be as fast as possible. You want to make sure that, we invest so that you can get back to building your business. And so I would say that, it's anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months. In reality, depends how much you're raising from, how specialized you are. So a couple of things you can do to speed up the process. One, have a data room that's really robust. So have all of your legal documents in it, have your full financials in there, have all your product information, overshare everything, because the VC funds are going to have an analyst, and they're basically going to say, put the investment memo together and pick everything apart. So the more robust your data room is, the easier it will be to raise money. I would say that you don't want to necessarily give your data room to everybody, because you just really want to make sure you're focusing on the high quality. So you can have like an intro data room and then you're like super deep data room. The other thing you can do, which I've seen a little bit lately, is you write my investment memo for me. So put in there an investment memo, just go look up the templates and say, here's my market size, here's, my growth plan, here's my team. So, all of that, as I'm reading it, you've basically been able, instead of having to do it through individual documents or a pitch deck, like the investment memo is there. So it's super interesting, particularly if you have a more technical company and it might be a little more difficult to get my head around either your market or your product or something like that. That could also be very helpful. But some spaces are moving so quickly that some investors are writing term sheets before doing due diligence and making the term sheet subject to due diligence, which is crazy. It's like, I don't think that's really in anybody's best interest, but some things are just moving really fast. And other times, if you're really technical, it does take us a long time to really make sure that we're making the right bet.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So we do have two questions in the chat. A follow-up from Gabrielle asking, VCs often ask how they can help. What sort of help is in scope for us to ask for?
Anything's on the table. And getting back to my earlier question about doing your research, so you can do your research and say, oh, Nicole, I see you're an accountant. I am not an accountant. I need help with my financial model. I need help with building up my variance analysis for what happens, the different scenario analysis. What happens if I don't get this customer or that customer? How do I hire a bookkeeper? All of those types of things. Or, one of my colleagues, he's worked in, big industry for many, many years, and he, did a lot of innovation projects. And so maybe can you help me figure out how to navigate, some of these big corporates? Can you help? There's all kinds of stuff. I've done everything from helping people hire to picking out a dress for an award ceremony. It can really be anything. So, I think it's making sure that as you grow and iterate through your company, you need to know what your needs are, and you need to figure out, where you can get help. The one thing I would say is that VCs like to be on boards because, we want to help in the direction of the company. And so one of the things that's very important is how do you build an effective board so that, you can have an honest conversation about the opportunities and challenges that you have within your company. So that's number one, is being able to, work with your investor because they're on lots and lots of boards. They can help you build that governance structure that's really, really beneficial. Because sometimes you don't always want to come with problems. You want to sometimes come with solutions. You want to impress your board, but you also need to make sure that it's a mechanism so that you're not just going and saying here's all the great things I've done over the last 3 months. You can actually use it as an opportunity to tap into the expertise around the table and say, help me with my next 3 months and my next 3 years. Everybody can read your package. It's you highlight a few things, but focus on how do you actually get this brain power around the table to help you solve the problems or take advantage of the opportunities you have. So I think that's really important. And even if you're a pre-seed or seed company, put together an advisory board and start to go through the motions of setting up that proper governance structure, even if from a legal perspective, they don't have a vote. I think it's just really important to, figure out how to not just always be working in your business, but to also be working on your business and being able to look at that from that perspective.
Perfect. So we have one more question, actually two. What are some key points you're looking out for an initial investor pitch? And lastly, what are some of the differentiating factors in 2022 you're looking for in a startup?
So in your pitch deck, every pitch deck is different. So there's a couple of things. Keep it clean and simple. Think about if you're pitching your 5-year-old daughter or your 80-year-old grandmother, keeping the messaging simple, and then you can go deeper depending on how sophisticated, some of the investors are. I'm an accountant. I'm not an engineer. I'm just going to ask you more business related questions. One of my colleagues is much more technical. She just wants to focus on product in the first meeting. So you need to definitely have kind of your core slides, but then the ability to go deeper later. You're never going to get it all out. So think about, you're going to have to jump around. You're going to be thrown off depending on who's in the meeting and, if it's their last meeting of the day, the first meeting of the day, whatever it is. So you have to be really flexible. You have to know it inside and out. And it's really about that storytelling element. The pitch deck is to be able to get a more deeper meeting so that you can go, and actually talk about it in more detail. If you use some of those DocSend, solutions, you can actually see how many people read your pitch deck beforehand. Literally, people are probably reading it the hour before you pitch if you send it beforehand. So even just keeping a one pager or a very, very short, more visual focused pitch deck, as a pre-read is great. It depends on the VC. A lot of them are busy. They see thousands of pitches a year, so they don't have time to really dig in. So there's, again, no right answer to the pitch deck, but just make sure that you clearly identify the problem you're solving. You clearly show that you're in a big market. You clearly show that you guys are the right team to do this. and you clearly show why you want that VC and how they can help you. So I think, there's a couple of key things. Have some appendix slides. So keep your main deck pretty short, and then just use lots of appendix slides so you can jump down into them if needed, particularly from the technical elements of it. So if you do end up with, a whole meeting room full of engineers and you didn't expect that, then you can actually say, oh, okay, you guys know what you're doing. Let's actually just jump down into it from a product perspective. Or you end up with a room of accountants. Okay, you guys just want to talk about my forecast. Here's all my assumptions. So I think that, there's no right answer to that. That's what's hard about this industry is there's like 2 wrong answers and 15 right answers. And it's up to you to kind of concurrently move those forward and think about, how to achieve them. And differentiating factors, I would say everybody is impressed by traction. So if you don't have paying customers, get paying customers if you can, because revenue is the cheapest form of financing. If you don't have paying customers, sign them up to, LOIs, or sign them up to pilots, or, be able to show that you're able to get the market to get excited about it. I would say that's number one, get them together as much as possible. I would say that's what impresses people the most.
Perfect. And we have Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. That was very, very helpful. I got a couple questions. Am I allowed to do that, Isioma?
Yes, I think we might be able to go a little bit since we had a little time off from the whole link thing. So we can go a little bit over 5.
Okay, the first question, a lot of this seemed to be oriented around technology firms. We're actually a medical device. Startup Class 1 medical device is our first one. Do you advise us to really just if we were to go down the VC path, do you advise us to focus on VCs that are really oriented that way, or are a lot of VCs diverse? What's your kind of guidance there?
So in areas like that, I would definitely say that a generalist VC doesn't have, I don't have the expertise to be able to, help determine if that's like an amazing product or like how the market will work. And so it's going to take me probably a little longer to be able to do that assessment. I'll have to maybe bring somebody in to do a technical assessment. I'll have to ask some people in my network. I can probably get to a really great conclusion and add a lot of value because, I understand, kind of things about, general industry or governance and things like that. But you're going to need time to work through that with me. So sometimes it's good to have like an angel investor or a very specialized VC that understands this to kind of be the one to validate, and then other investors can rely on that a little bit. So it's a mix, but I would say that the industry, does, kind of rely on some of these more specialized VCs to help us make some of those decisions.
Okay, so you might be interested, but you would bring in another specialized VC to potentially go with you?
Or I'd have to find somebody in my network that really understood that. Oftentimes there's people in VCs that, have that expertise. It just might not be, what their fund is fully focused on either.
Okay, no, that's
so there might be a more general fund that has somebody that understands the space.
My second question had to do with, you quoted 10x. I've seen some VCs looking for 20x returns. What is kind of the, in your experience, what's your expectation on returns? And then I do have a corollary question that goes with that, because it's really over what time period. And most folks that I've known that have had VCs have been, and I hate to make this sound negative, but they've kind of been forced into a sale.
100%.
3-year or 5-year to get out of it. Are there any circumstances where a VC arrangement can result in a company continuing to exist and to grow?
Yes. So as a VC, we're a legal entity, and typically VCs have a 10-year fund life, and then we have the option to extend it by 2 years. So that's very 10 and 2. That's very, very typical. And so we've promised our investors, so all of those institutionals like banks, insurance companies, pension funds, they've invested in us and they want their money back. And so we have to be able to deliver on that. And you actually have to understand where we are in our fund life. So I invest in your company in fund one, in year one. I've got 12 years to be able to get an exit. If I invest in your company and I'm already in year 4, then that's only 8 years left, right? And so like legally, I can't hold your shares any longer. I'm going to have to sell. Now that could be selling your company so I get an exit. It could be somebody else, just buys my shares and buys me out and you continue to grow. But there are funds like, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is like the Microsoft, like Bill Gates climate fund, like they have like a 20-year fund life because they know that these climate technologies take longer. So it really, just depends on, the fund. And it depends, like if you want to build this company for, 20 years, then there's other types of, funding that might be a better fit, because as VCs, we need to see that exit to, satisfy our investors as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. We do have Yuji with his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good segue to my question as well. Yuji from Adaptive Medical, previously with Lab to Market Oceans. We're a medical device company as well, but let's say you're gaining some tractions, you've raised, a couple rounds of investments. As investors, what kind of metrics do you look for in kind of follow-on rounds in terms of sales trending? What kind of sales track record are you looking for? What kind of growth are you looking for?
So again, it depends by industry. So if you're a SaaS company or an IT company, we expect you to have revenue. We expect you to grow, like triple, double. So like triple the first year, triple the second year, double the third year. So those are like, kind of standard, metrics that people look for. With low churn rates, you're being able to retain a lot of your customers. In the medical industry, it's very different, where you might go many, many years without any revenue, and then you sell to, a bigger medical device company without any revenue, but you've been able to prove the technology. Other times you might only have 2 customers that provide the majority of your revenue, which to an IT company is super risky. And so I would say that, it's really important to just understand what the industry benchmarks for your particular, type of technology is. And that also helps when you have specialized investors or investors that have invested in the space. So if you look at a fund and they have 2 or 3 companies that are kind of similar business models, then you know that they can help you with that. So again, no right answer, but getting a good lawyer, a good accountant that has, companies in similar spaces can help you compare against that.
Okay, perfect. We don't have any more questions, but I think I want to end with one question. I know from being in the VC industry for 2 months, there are situations where a founder approaches, for instance, Sandpiper Ventures, and at the moment they're just not a great fit. The question I would have for that would be, how would founders foster and maintain their relationships if they've reached out and they have good feedback of why and what numbers don't look too good to be a right investment at that moment, but to kind of keep them in the peripheral of that specific VC or others?
Yeah, and so at my fund, we're only going to make 18 to 20 investments, but we're probably going to legitimately do due diligence on well over 100. And some of those companies are great companies, but we just didn't think the market was big enough, or maybe it was too close to another investment that we have, or maybe like this space just isn't something we think we have enough expertise in to add value, or maybe the more we look into the space, we just don't get excited about it because the growth isn't as fast as another sector, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we like this other one better than that one. And so it's really important to just build a good relationship, because just because I don't invest in you or Sandpiper doesn't invest in you doesn't mean you're not a good company. It doesn't mean we can't keep in touch, because we might change our mind on an industry later, like ed tech. If a pandemic happens and all the kids have to work from home, then and take schooling from home, then all of a sudden ed tech becomes something that we feel is a much higher growth market than we originally thought, and now all of a sudden we're going to invest. Just keeping me updated, like from a governance perspective. Like, I'm not a specialist in any way, but I'm on lots of boards, I meet lots of people. Maybe I can introduce you to a customer or your next investor. So I think it's just a matter of general like relationship building and curiosity. And so putting me on, asking me if I can be on your update list, reaching out to me. I might want to reach out to you every now and then because I know that you have, expertise in this industry and can help me look at other companies. Or, I think it's just a matter of like, all of us want the same goals to have, new innovations and new technologies grow and scale. And so it's just a matter of, figuring out the ways to keep in touch. And I love getting, updates on companies I've spoken to before. And just because I didn't invest doesn't mean that, we still can't help each other, occasionally. Following each other on Twitter, retweeting my stuff. I'll retweet your stuff. Just sending me interesting tidbits even now and then, even if it's not a deep interaction. I think it just keeps top of mind.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Wow, that was great. I know I learned a lot, and I'm hoping everyone else had something they can take away from this. We actually are right on time, so that's perfect, even with the little technical difficulties. Thank you so much, Nicole, for taking the time out to share this great knowledge with us. And for everyone else, please be expecting an email after this with details of our next session. We will be talking about ESG policy implementation. And I hope you all enjoyed today, and we're looking forward to seeing you for the next session.
Thanks, Izzy. You did a great job. And everybody, thanks for being a founder. It's really important. You're the backbone of our economy.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.